What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV, back here for yet another panel show, and there's a lot to get into today. But first of all, let's introduce, first and foremost, returning to the panel and returning to the show is Jacob from United Spurs of America. How are we, Jacob?
I'm doing well. I just noticed my camera's out of focus, so I'm really trying to figure out what's going on there with that. But apologies.
It wasn't before. We see you in the back end, but it wasn't before. So it's something that's just happened. I don't know what's happened, mate. It's all good.
I was having a lovely conversation with Kish earlier before the show, and then my camera decided right when show started to go out of focus. I'll sort that in just a second, but I'm doing well. I'm too blessed to be stressed. Good morning from El Paso, Texas. Very lovely to share the screen with you fine gentlemen, and very nice to meet Kish as well.
Great to have you back on, Jacob, that's for sure. But a brand new guest to the show, making his debut on the panel and on We Are Tottenham TV, is Kish from Lily White Lab. How are you, Kish?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm happy to be on there. I'm excited to get into it. Yeah, happy to be here, man.
Good to have you as well. And if you haven't, do go and subscribe to both of their lovely channels as well here on YouTube. But look, let's get straight into it, because there's been a lot been said about the form of Tottenham Hotspur in recent weeks, or well, for a number of weeks, to be honest. And when you look at it, we'll start off with you, Kish. Are you worried about the Spurs form? Is the Spurs form, bad form, being overstated at the moment? Because when you look at it, last 10 games, we sit 4th in the form table. You take it to the last 5 games, we do sit 8th. But do you think the bad form has been overstated?
No, I think we have been in bad form. I think even games where we've won, I think we haven't dominated games in a while that I can remember. It's been very kind of end-to-end basketball type games where it could go either way, and it has gone either way in some games. So I do think there are some issues there. I'm not worried kind of long term, but I do think currently there's definitely some issues to sort out for the coach and stuff.
Yeah. What do you put that down to? Why are we not? Because the way I look at it is that we haven't played consistently well since probably the first 10 games of the season. And obviously that Chelsea game, we had loads of injuries, suspensions, and it derailed our season massively. But since these players have started to filter back, why haven't we been able to hit those heights again?
I think there's a few reasons. I think familiarity within the system, and in terms of cohesion, playing with one another, those players who have come back from injury, suspensions, AFCON, Asian Cup, etc. So I think this system is very reliant on fluidity, and especially in terms of attacking and in possession stuff, there needs to be a lot of cohesion from player to player, because the system's so fluid and there's so many rotations. And I think that takes time, and especially players who aren't up to kind of match fitness, and also haven't really played many games all as kind of one unit. I think that's definitely an issue. I also think Ange has some kind of responsibilities to take here, in terms of playing players in roles that don't necessarily suit their profile, and probably being not adaptable enough, not in terms of overall kind of intent, but just in terms of where he's playing players and what kind of things he's asking them to do. I think there's a lot of kind of issues there, which have affected us in especially the last couple of games.
What players are you referring to? Emerson, I'm guessing. Emerson potentially.
So I think the Wolves game is a great example. I think Emerson and Davies are not Poro and Udogie. They're complete different players. They don't have the attributes that those players have, both physically and technically. And asking them to play as high and be as kind of responsible in possession as he did, I think was a big issue. And I think one of the main reasons that was a big issue is because it cramped the space for other players. So Maddison, Sarr, Bissouma, they were so kind of penned in that central area because Emerson and Davies were bringing their wingers infield. And I just thought if he had just left them kind of as traditional fullbacks and let our midfield dominate theirs, I think that would have been a better ploy, because we already had the overload in there. They were playing two. I think they were playing Gomez and Lamina we had Bissouma, Sarr, and Maddison. So bringing the wingers in just kind of cramped the space, and players like Maddison really struggled as well.
It's interesting, like, that point, because it is definitely true. Like, Emerson and Davis, I think, are not suited to that inverted role as much as our other fullbacks. But it's interesting because Ange has shown he's willing to, like, be adaptable. With, you know, when the centre back issue happened, he played Emerson and Davis there when we had people like Dyer, who was a more recognised centre back. So he has showed he's able to do that. So maybe it's a case of he had to see kind of Emerson, like he had to. I think he played Dyer one game, didn't he, against Wolves, and decided, look,
never saw him again.
I've had enough of that. So maybe, and that was Wolves, ironically enough. So maybe he might see Emerson and think, actually, I'm going to look for a different solution there. If he has
played Emerson on the other side, though, and I don't see too much of a difference whether it's right or left back in terms of whether he's suited to the role. I think we all know, we saw Emerson play left back in that Wolves game earlier on in the season, and when he was inverting into the middle, every time it got to Emerson, our moves broke down, and that was a key reason why we lost that game. We just couldn't keep a hold of the ball. And I don't see how anyone, especially Ange, could see that Emerson is good for that role, inverting into the middle spaces, into the half spaces, into the centre of the park, from right back or left back, to be honest. So,
and I think we have options like Sarr could probably do that job, or something like that, or put him in one of the midfielders in there. I think that would be a better option.
Yeah, I completely agree. But let's move on to Jacob. Like, what's your take on it? Do you agree with Kish that it hasn't been overstated and we have been really poor? Or when you look at the form table being fourth over the last 10 games, or picked up the fourth most points in the last 10 games of the Premier League, do you think that people are just a bit going overboard a little bit?
Well, for me, when you have a new manager coming in and we've lacked a philosophy for quite some time, I would prefer to have consistency in philosophy than adaptability to lack of talent. So by putting Davies and putting Emerson as inverting fullbacks, that's saying you either can do the job or you can't do the job. And we're going to find out, because that's just when tire meets the road. That's just what you find out is, can they work and will they work in the system? And it's just shown time and time again. Eric Dyer, that as well, is someone who got slotted in. I think Romero got injured early on in the season. Dyer came in and then we lost. And to me, these are things indicative of Ainge willing to be adaptable. When people say, I've heard a lot that, oh, he's not willing, he's so stubborn, he's naive, he's this, he's that, and they have all these words under the sun for Ainge Postecoglou. But for me, like you mentioned, Emerson Royale's played 3 different positions. Ben Davies has played 2 different positions on 3 different occasions. So when you talk about Kulusevski plays right wing, plays the 10, he's done it in game. He's started games with it. He's gone. This is what I'm saying. He has been adaptable. We looked completely different the first time we played Wolves to the game following and the game prior to that. So again, that's 3 matches in quick succession that are all different than the previous. So I don't buy into this notion that he's too rigid, he's too stubborn, he's this, that, and the other. To me, it's fans getting frustrated and upset with the results and the lack of putting teams away and the lack of really consistently managing 90 minutes of football, because what we see is halves or spurts. You know, Wolves was a perfect example. We had that one moment of brilliance with Kulusevski there on the right-hand side. Outside of that, I can't really remember what was even good about that game. And to me, that is not the first time. Brentford, perfect example. They dominated us in the first 45. We came out and we won the game in the second 45. That's fantastic. But I think fans getting frustrated, they want to see that over 90 minutes. And I understand, and I'm with that. But for me, this is all part of the growing process. Change is never easy. Change never feels great. It's always uncomfortable. And there's going to be these uncomfortable moments. I think every Spurs fan in the summer knew when Ainge Postecoglou came in that, 1, it's going to be a season for change, and 2, to really just embrace whatever's going on. For me, that's why the ups, the downs, I've felt them all, and I'm just riding it. And to me, the expectations for Ainge Postecoglou don't really kick in until he's had at least 4 windows to say, I like this guy, I don't like this guy, get this guy out of here. Because right now he's still playing. I think when you look at the starting 11 versus Wolves, how many of those were actually Ainge Postecoglou's choices or signings, or even signings under Ainge Postecoglou, if you want to say it's Johan Lange and et cetera making these decisions? How many of those players, like Kulusevski, we exercised his option before we appointed Ainge Postecoglou. So to me, he's trying to figure out where I can slot this guy in, because there's clearly a talent there, but it's just not working in this. But to me, these things will get worked out the more that he's here. There's also something that he's shown at Celtic, at Yokohama as well. I believe that's the name. But
Yeah.
historically starts out kind of slow and then ends up, once he has time to instill his philosophy. And again, a student only learns as long as they're in the classroom. So the longer our players are 11, are 24, healthy 24, not Ryan Sessegnon on the bench, and Lo Celso as well, and the physio. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about his guys in that room listening to his words 6-7 days a week. Once we get to that point, that's when we start the real. For me, that's when it really begins. This is just still him sorting out the decorations in the room, so to speak.
Jacob, do you think that after the first 10 games of the season before that Chelsea game, that Spurs fans got lulled into a bit of a false sense of security, thinking maybe this is a bit of a new manager bounce the first 10 games and we think that we're a bit better than we are? And, Ange said at the time as well that bumps in the road will happen. There'll be ups and downs during the season. And then when the downs come, the fans just kick their toys out of the pram. Do you think that we did get lulled into a bit of a false sense of security in the first 10 games?
On my birthday, November 1st, we were top of the league. How could we not? How could we not? I'm turning a year older watching the sun go past me, and I'm thinking, wow, we're top of the league. We have Ange Postecoglou. The whole motto of Tottenham Hotspur is to dare is to do. And the most previous, it was dare, dream, do. And Ange Postecoglou gave fans the right to go out there and believe however they want to believe. And then the following week say, we also need to manage our expectations, but you can also believe whatever you want to believe, because I think he said that and then we lost. But to me, it's just, of course, we're going to get a little excited once we start seeing some really progressive football. We're seeing these triangle passings on the left, on the right, in the front, our half, their half. And we're starting to think, wow, we're really putting something together. Yeah, you're seeing Ben Davies getting a tune out of him at left center back. And for me, this is a guy I haven't really wanted at the club for the last 4 years, because I felt like it's time to move on from this old era of players. I feel like it's been time to move on from. That takes time, and that takes really a philosophy, like I was saying earlier. Once you have that philosophy, you can say, here's who fits in there, here's who doesn't. And if you don't have that, then it's just, oh, well, here's Emerson Royale. Now here's Jed Spence. Now here's Pedro Porro. And that's 3 right backs. And it's like, what am I supposed to do with all these guys? So to me, I think if you didn't enjoy yourself in that beginning part of the season, what are we doing here? Why aren't we enjoying this? Football brings me joy. Tottenham makes me happy. And when those two things coincide, it's a beautiful time. There's nothing like match day. And when you're undefeated for 10 matches, it's hard to not get a little head of steam. But obviously, I think that we got a little ahead of ourselves. People were talking title charge, this, that, and the other, and it's been on full display. And I think it's a great learning moment as well for people that, look, you need a full squad to challenge for a Premier League title. That is evident. Look at the 3 clubs that have pulled away. They have built squads over the last 4 years for Arsenal, 6-7 years for Liverpool. Was it 7 years for Pep? This is what I'm saying. They've been building that. And when you see with Liverpool, they have players go out, well, bring on these kids, because they've been playing this system in the academy. That's what I want to see too for ours. I want to see these young kids coming through. Madison goes out, don't worry. We've got James Madison Jr. in the academy who's been playing it for 6 years. That's what I want to see. And once we're there, that's really going to be the sweet spot.
Yeah, and I think we're building to that point, and hopefully we'll get there sooner rather than later. But Sim, what was your take on it? Do you think the form's been overstated? The bad form?
Sorry?
The bad form?
Yeah, I think it's no secret that we definitely haven't been as good in the last 10 games as we were in the first. I think it's obvious. I think there were, as even Ange pointed out, there were probably even games where we did have that load of injuries where we probably played better than we have maybe in some recent games. I think there are some games we've dropped points recently, and there are some games where we dropped points during that really bad run where we probably had more control in those games, in that bad run when we ended up losing, than we did in games recently, where maybe in some games we picked up points where we had even less control. Let's say like the Brighton game, we didn't have a lot of control in that game, yet we ended up picking up 3 points compared to maybe other games we had more control and end up losing. So I think it's definitely fair to say we're having a bit of an issue controlling the opposition right now. We're giving way too many chances to the opposition. That's definitely true. When we are in the period where we're second best, so we're behind where the opposition have control. I think we're struggling to contain their ability to create chances, especially in transition. You saw how effective Neto was in the Wolves game last week. He completely tore us to shreds when Wolves were able to nick the ball. And we definitely seem to be struggling against teams who play a bit of a lower block and play in a back five as well. If you saw against Brentford, against Wolves, they play a back five, but especially when they're defending, their wing backs seem to be very tucked in. It's almost like a very narrow back five, almost. And the problem we have when we're doing that is because it's so narrow, we can't operate centrally, and then we give the ball out wide and our wingers can't do anything because they're not very good from creating chances. So it leads to us looking very ineffective right now. So that is a bit of an issue I'm seeing. We're currently saying as well. I think Kish is absolutely right. The familiarity, a lot of the familiarity with a lot of the players, still getting used to the system, who are coming back from injury, all these different things, is still leading us looking a bit disjointed at the moment. And it's maybe why we're not starting games in first halves very well. But yet, when we come out in the second half, usually it's a lot better for one reason or another. Maybe Ange, has worked things out. You can have a word with them in the
It does seem to be a quick drop off in that second half, though, after the initial burst. It happened against Brentford. It happened against Wolves.
Yes, against Brentford and Wolves. Well, Brentford we got 3 goals. Wolves we got 1 goal, and then it was a bit of. I thought actually for about half that half we were pretty good, and against Brighton as well. You could say we got the equaliser, made those 3 subs, and it was a big drop off. Even though again we came out second half really well. Even against Everton, came out second half really well, and then last 10 minutes we had a bit of a drop off. So I can't put my finger on why we seem to get a second win in that second half and then have a massive drop off late in the game, but we definitely do see an uptick in the second half. That's for definite. So the reason why we drop off again is hard to know, but Ange definitely can see what's going on in that first half, and he seems to be able to rectify it. Whether it means just getting the players to put an extra bit of energy, getting them pressing a lot higher, more intensely, or having a few tactical issues, putting Kulusevski back in the centre or whatnot. But there's definitely a problem at the moment defensively where we're not good enough at keeping the ball, and because we're allowing so many transitions and then fullbacks are very inverted, it means that as soon as the opposition get the ball, they're pretty much got an opportunity to create a chance every single time. And that is a consequence of Ange. I'm not saying it's a problem. I'm just saying the way he is setting us up is causing these problems. And I'm not saying we have to change that. We just have to get better at the setup. That is for me, the solution. A lot of people will say, maybe Ange is too open. Maybe the problem is he has to set up in a different way. If you want to get results, right now, maybe you should set up in a different way. Maybe that is the answer. But if you're looking for a long-term vision, long-term philosophy, for me, the solution is you just have to get better at enacting this plan rather than looking always at the short term and thinking we need to change up the way we play because right now we're doing these certain things wrong. And if we change up on the way that play, maybe that would lessen the weaknesses that we're showing right now. So look, we're not in great form. But I do think, first of all, this break will do us well. And I do think we're showing enough in games to show me that when we're doing things right, we're doing things really well and we're on top of the opposition and we're creating chances, we're looking good. It's just we need to be able to get into a game state where when we don't have control of the opposition, we're not conceding as many chances as we are, because that's a problem.
Yeah, it is. It just seems like one ball down the middle just seems to open us up every time. But in terms of Ange Postecoglou's tactics, Kish, do you feel like teams have found him out? Or do you feel like we just don't have the players to implement the system week in, week out? I mean, what do you think it's down to?
So I think on that, the kind of multiple transitions per game, I think there's a few ways you can kind of resolve that in some ways, I guess. I think the first way is he might look to build up in a different way. So rather than building up in a kind of 2-3 shape, which is 2 centre backs and either one of the midfielders, the 6 and the fullback, or however, but it builds up that way. You look to build up in a 3-2 shape where you've got maybe one reserved fullback and then Romero pushes over, or the other way around, and you have more coverage across the pitch. That's one way. I think in the current setup, the reasons we're giving away so many transitions is is for a few reasons. And I think, first of all, our front our front three are players who want to run in behind constantly, aren't secure in possession, barring maybe Kulusevski. Players who run away from the ball, don't kind of want it to feet. And so every time they get the ball, it's kind of either a final action or they lose the ball. And then it comes right back the other way, and we can't gain any territory up the pitch. So we're not camping into other teams' halves anymore. We're constantly back and forth, and that puts a lot of strain on the centre backs anyway. The other way, I think, is because of that, the midfielders are playing so directly. So Maddison, Bentancur especially, I think they're forcing often that forward pass. And I know that's Ange's philosophy, but they need to learn how to manage games better in terms of, okay, we're 1-0 up here. It's becoming very end-to-end. Let's take this thing out of the game. Let's pop a couple passes around. Let's slow the game down at times and not be so full throttle, because we're just turning the ball over constantly. And so I think that's another factor. And then the last one is our number 6, who is either at the moment Bissouma or Bentancur. And those two are not natural lone pivots. Bissouma especially loves to roam. You see him kind of on the edge of the opposition penalty area. You see him picking up the ball out wide at times. And that just leaves massive spaces. And if we're going to play this way, we need a number 6, in my eyes, who his main job is to hold that center of the pitch and sniff out transitions, win the second balls, and give it back to our players, forward-thinking players. And so him being so free and kind of so kind of eager to get involved in all the build-up play and all the attacking play means that we're just so vulnerable going backwards. And I think Bentancur also comes with its own issues there. So I think there's some of the reasons why tactically we're looking so vulnerable.
In terms of bringing back to the Bissouma point, like, I bring it back to the first 10 games of the season again, because he was in that 6th role. He looked absolutely perfect for that role in that period of time. He got those sending offs, and I feel like something's just diminished from his game. He's lost an element of something from his game, and I can't put my finger on what it is, but he just doesn't seem the same player. And do you feel like if he can get back to those levels, then we still need that number 6?
So I think Bissouma suits a certain type of game best, and I think those first 10 games we saw teams coming out more because they were kind of not as expectant of us dominating games. They'd come and press us higher. Not every game, but a lot of those first 10, he was being pressed very high, and that's where he can wriggle out of challenges, and that's his kind of bread and butter. He's like so good in tight areas, and then suddenly the game switches because he's got out of 3 players and there's so much space. And I think that's where I like Bissouma as the number 6, where we're being pressed. But when we're being hit with transition 24/7, and he's not got the best passing range. So when he's given time, he can't switch the ball from one side to the other with a pass. His passing kind of risk is quite limited. So he's not going to break lines that often with his passing. He might with a little dribble. So that's why what I put down the Bissouma thing too, especially that he is great in games where he's pressed, like Arsenal, for example, he was great. But also there's definitely, I think, for me, a confidence issue there. So I think he's a player that likes to be loved, and kind of he needs to pick up form before he starts showing kind of what kind of player he is. So I think that's also an issue. So we haven't even seen him do many of those dribbles, even when he is pressed at times, because I think the confidence has dropped a bit. But yeah, he's not my kind of primary long-term number 6 issue, because I don't think he suits the role.
Yeah, a player that I think would be perfect for those games where we're suffering on the transition is someone like a João Paulinho or Fulham. Like, he would just sit in those spaces. He'll gobble up everything that comes his way, can play the lone pivot as well. I do feel like we need someone of that ilk to come in the summer. But look, let's move on from this topic and let's talk about the under-21s, the youngsters coming through at the moment, because everyone saw the cup final on the weekend. Liverpool bringing on all those kids and beating them billionaire bottle jobs that were Chelsea and Pochettino on the weekend. That brought a smile to all our faces. But let's start off with you, Jacob. Do you feel like these youngsters need to be given more of a chance? And why haven't they been given more of a chance when we had all those injuries?
It's an interesting discussion because I remember when Jose was here, I was questioning those very same things. Why aren't we seeing some of these kids? And to me, I could see it both ways for Ange Postecoglou being like, can I trust my job? This is the audition period, right? This is when we're all seeing what's he made of? What's he gonna do? What are we looking like? And then now he's like, well, let me bring these kids up. I started getting excited in the beginning of the season, seeing the Donleys, the Dorringtons on the bench. The Iago Santiago was on the bench once, and I'm like, okay, because I subscribe to Spurs play. I'll admit it. I subscribe to Spurs play, and I watch the academy matches. But it's very much worth the dollar because to watch the youth is something I've been crying out for. Like I wish we could watch the youth games, and now they're actually providing that for us. So of course I'm going to take advantage of it, and so it's very exciting to see these kids coming through. But for me, it now looking back and it was a little bit more retrospection. I think that it was more he put those kids on the bench because we needed numbers first and foremost. We were facing injuries, suspensions, tournaments, etc., and we needed bodies. We needed warm bodies who could fill the bench. And there's a reason why they weren't subbed on. And if they were subbed on, I think Donnelly got subbed on once or twice for a handful of minutes. That's just a little disheartening from a U21 side, but this has been a bigger problem than just this year. The pathway from the youth team to the first team has been broken for quite some time, and you just get the occasional here's a skip, here's an all of Harry Winks and now Harry Kane and so you get that, and that kind of makes the academy believe, well, I could do it if I'm good enough or if I do the right things. But again, to me, I just think that it's a little disheartening when there's not that many opportunities handed out for these kids who've clearly been working hard. I don't know right now the table fixtures, but for a good part of the season, our U21s were top of their league, our U18s were top of their league, and our U17s were top of their league. So to me, that just speaks to, first of all, their level, or excuse me, their talent at their level. But do we know that they could take that drastic step up to the Premier League? Do we know they can make that drastic step up to a championship? These are questions we don't know. And we're starting to find out. It does look like Alfie Devine could fit in just fine in the championship. He's getting assists. He's getting goals. Ashley Phillips, the new manager over there, he's loving on him. I know that he knows Alfie Devine from his previous managerial position at the England U somethings. And so for me, it's taken a while, but an Alfie Devine is getting his chance. So maybe next year he could potentially infiltrate this 25. I mean, I would love to see something like that because then it breeds confidence with the younger kids that I just try a little harder, I push a little harder, take a loan somewhere. You never know where I may end up. And for me, I also like Dane Scarlett was that one hopeful that we've been hoping on for about 3-4 years. Jose said, "Oh, he's a star boy." Love Dane Scarlett. Conte, same thing. Everyone says they love Dane Scarlett, but when push comes to shove, Dane Scarlett's not even getting minutes on his loans. And when he did last year do well for Portsmouth, it was like for a moment in the beginning, and then it just kind of fell off. So for me, I don't necessarily blame Dane Scarlett for that because he's been here, he's been there. You just kind of playing with the young man's emotions and what he thinks his life is going to end up. And these kids are all humans too, and they're growing young men, and I understand what it's like to be that age, not in their position obviously, but to be at that stage where you're like, where am I going to go, where am I going to play, like who really believes in me and who trusts in me enough to make me believe in myself. Kind of like with what Kish was saying. Basuma's one of those guys that thrives on putting an arm around you, say, you're my guy, go get this. Because to me, we weren't having that 6s and 8s conversation in the beginning of the season. So I think it's going to take Angel a little bit putting his arm around these kids and saying, like, he believes in them. But again, do you want to hinge your probationary period, let's say, on your tenure at your new club, at the biggest venue that you've ever managed at, the highest level you've ever managed at? You're going to risk it on some kids? I don't know. Not yet, anyway, is what I would say if I'm Ange Postecoglou. So I think that's something that will be worked out over time. We're still figuring out the hierarchy of our recruitment in the academy, et cetera. We're buying up all this young talent. Now we got to see what we can do with it. Jude Soonsup-Bell, another name that comes to mind. Bought him off Chelsea. Let's see. Let's start seeing some of this. And the more competitions we're in, i.e. European football next year, the more we're going to see some of these things. So I'm not too worried about it right now.
You say like the pathway's been broken for a number of years. When it wasn't broken, it was Alex Inglethorpe that was running the academy at the time, and now he's the one running the academy at Liverpool. So it's no surprise to me that you're seeing these kind of players like filter through at Liverpool. But it did take a ginormous injury crisis at Liverpool to see these players come through. So it was a bit disheartening maybe not to see these players when we had that kind of major injury crisis halfway through the season, when you're looking at the under-21s, top of their league, undefeated this season, the under-18s are third in their league, 3 points off the top. Where do you sit with it, Sim? Do you feel like we should have by now seen more of these players?
I think definitely, as you said, like when we had the injury crisis, you know, we're playing Emerson and Davis as centre-back. At that stage, that was disappointing not to have at least seen Phillips given a go for, you know, just try him out, see how he does, put him
Especially as they said, he was brought in to be part of the first team.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to be playing Emerson and Davis, look, to be fair, Davis did all right, but if you're going to be playing Emerson there, who I don't think played very well when he was a centre-back by and large, in my opinion, why not give Ashley Phillips a run out just to give him a go to see how he does and see if he can kind of sink or swim? And if he sinks, then yeah, you could argue he can kill his confidence. But if it's only one game, then you realise, okay, he's not ready. You can put him back. You can take him on loan and do what you're doing now. But if he swims and, you know, he does really well, all of a sudden that's another option there. And also you're giving him confidence. You're giving him opportunities to develop his game, get used to the Premier League early as well. And obviously right now we're seeing him on loan at Plymouth. The reports are very, very strong. Apparently he's doing really well. So I think on those elements, that was disappointing we didn't see him. Same with like Donnelly. Like I think there were some games. I think Lo Celso and Maddison were both injured, and I think on those occasions it would have been nice just for one game, maybe against a team who will sit a low block or whatever. Put Donnelly in, see how he does.
Start or bring him on, give him more minutes.
I think start him, and I'd take him off if it's not working. But if we there were some games where we were playing like Basuma, Højbjerg and Sarr all together, which lacked any sort of creativity or any sort of attacking. I guess we had Kulusevski there as well, so we put him central. But maybe in those occasions where we saw Kulusevski more as a right winger, you can put Donnelly in from the start just to give him a game, see what he does. But I understand what Andrew's point of view is, and also in a weird way, to Jacob's point, if he puts Emerson and Davis there or whatever, it actually gives him more leeway in a weird way, because if he says I think Phillips is ready and puts him in and he has a bad game and it costs us a result, or like that, the finger we pointed more at Ange for that, because you technically have a player who's ready to play, fit your system because you've picked him. Whereas if you put Emerson there and it goes wrong, you just say, well, I had no other option because Emerson was the only fit centre back and I don't think Ashley Phillips is ready. So it kind of in a way gives him more excuse.
Bit of a safety net, you reckon?
In a way, I don't know if that's why he did it, but if you logically think about it, it gives him a bit more leeway to do that. I think it takes the you can't really criticise him too much if he's going to say Phillips is not ready and then he puts Emerson there and it goes wrong. He doesn't really have an excuse. Where if he puts Phillips in there and it goes wrong, like that's a recognised centre back and maybe the eye will be more on him.
But why not play Phillips if Ange is the one that said he's come in to be a part of the first team when we signed him in the summer?
That's what I'm saying. I would have liked to have seen him, but maybe that's part of the reason. I don't think it is. I don't think that's what he's thinking. But I'm just saying maybe subconsciously that could be part of it as well. And maybe he's just not ready. Go on, Jacob. What are you going to say?
I wanted to throw something in there because remember, my first question when we're talking about bringing a kid in is who's leaving off of the 11, and even if it is the Davies and Emerson. To me, in the locker room, what kind of message does that send? He kind of did it with Eric Dyer, and look at the pushback he got in the press. Look at the pushback, and that almost had a ripple effect. So I'm wondering if this happening after the whole Eric Dyer "don't question my integrity" thing, if that could possibly play a factor in ways like, well, I don't want to throw Emerson and Davies under the bus and then get questioned again. And then if, say, Ashley Phillips isn't working and is horrible in, say, 1-2 matches, everyone's going to look at me as like, oh, well, you icing out a veteran who clearly could play that. To me, I think that's obviously a grand assumption on my part, but I'm just throwing out there, maybe with the Eric Dyer thing happening and the kind of pushback he had from that, it could have altered the way he went forward with these youth kids.
Go on, Kish.
I just think I think that's a huge point, because I think Ange has talked a lot about kind of squad dynamics and how the feeling around the club. And I think I'm starting to think that this first season is about him kind of sending a message that if you work hard, everyone's going to get a go and everyone's going to be able to impress me. And then he's going to start trimming his squad from what he's seen. But I think to send a message basically to the first team squad and say, if you work hard in training, if you're performing in training, then you're going to get a chance. And I think Skip, Emerson, and Davies probably, unfortunately,
They all work hard. Yeah,
they're hard workers, and so he's rewarding them in that. And I think that kind of spreads a message. But I also think, in terms of bringing through academy players, I think it's always about kind of having an individual development plan for all of them. So let's say kind of Donnelly, right? Right now he's got Maddison in front of him, he's got Lo Celso in front of him. I think he needs to be, or there needs to be kind of a plan that, okay, when Donnelly's, let's say 21, he's going to be understudy to Maddison, and by 23 we want him to be kind of the main number 10 or whatever, right? And that's obviously if all goes to plan. And I think right now the squad's so bloated that, and there's so many players that don't quite fit, or kind of we don't really know where they fit, and it's stopping those young players coming through. And I think he or the club need to start offloading players, cut their losses with players, and then we'll start seeing kind of the fruits of the academy. Because I do think that the squad's too big right now, and to kind of leapfrog kind of a starting level player who's maybe Lo Celso, for example, he's played World Cups, he's like Argentina's first midfielder. To play Donnelly over him, what kind of message does that send to him? What kind of message does that send to everyone else? I do think Donnelly was ready this season, and I think he is ready now to play Premier League minutes. I've thought that, I've watched a lot of him, and I think that physically, mentally, and technically, he ticks all those boxes. With the Phillips one, I don't think he's ready to play the system. I think he really struggles in possession still, and I think he's quite stiff in terms of turning. So our system's very kind of big on defending the wide channels as a centre back, and also building up, playing kind of out from the back. So I think he's got developing to do, but I don't think that's a problem. But I think there are players who could make an impact, a positive impact now, but I think it's the bloated squad issue. I think the other two who could make an impact now are Santiago. I think we're missing that profile. I don't think he's necessarily a world beater, but I think what he does have is something we're missing in the squad, and that's 1v1 ability to take on his fullback, and we know our wingers really struggle with that. And the other one who's kind of making huge waves is Tyrese Hall, who's a kind of number 6/8, and I think he could play both pretty well, exceptionally well. And I think at number 6 he'd be better than the current options, but I don't imagine that happening because he's only just come up from the 18s. But those are the kind of three that I think could make a first team impact currently, and that doesn't mean they're the best talents. I just think they're the ones that fit currently in the current squad setup. So yeah.
Looking forward to next season, Kish. Like you said, there needs to be a pathway. Like, there needs to be a plan for these players. But it's always very tempting to get your checkbook out and always sign a player rather than look to bring in a player, develop your player in your academy, and kind of give them a chance. In your opinion, like going into next season, if let's say we can trim the squad, there's always talk of we need to bring a midfielder in. There's a lot of talk of us bringing a fourth centre back. For you, or even a winger, maybe a young winger on top of a winger we pay a lot of money for. For you, would you rather maybe give Divine that opportunity to be involved in the squad rather than sign another midfielder? Maybe give Santiago a chance on the wing. Maybe give Phillips a chance to be one of our first choice centre backs. Or would you still think, should we be in the mentality of, if we got a problem, we have to spend our way out of it?
So I think it's a case by case situation. So there's certain players whose potential I think is massive, and there's certain players that might be getting a bit of hype on kind of social media and stuff because of what they're doing in the 21s, but I don't see it translating because of their skill set and their kind of judgments that the staff have to make. I think there's certain players who have huge potential, but then again, the percentage of players that can make it as a top 6 Premier League level player is so small. It's like maybe there's 10 wingers in the world that improve our starting 11 right now, for example, or maybe a bit more. But you know what I mean? It's so small, and for that to come from your academy, the chances are always so small. I do think our academy is in its best moment, as it's been for a long time right now. But I think, again, it's a case-by-case basis. I don't think we have a winger currently at the club who takes us up the level that we need to go in terms of that position. But I think Devine or Donnelly could be a very good understudy to Maddison. So I think it's a case-by-case thing. Bergvall as well, who looks incredible. I think he's probably the best of the lot. So he's another one. But with the centre-backs, I don't think either of them are ready. I think Dorrington is probably, in my eyes, the highest ceiling player. But again, at 18, centre-backs don't really start their first team top level career until maybe 22, 23. So that's a 5-year waiting period. And I think especially with those centre-backs, we've got to be patient, really.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I just get a little bit...
Go on.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, like, I get a little jealous. Does anyone else get a little jealous when you see Kobe Mainoo, 18 years old?
I was just about to mention that.
To me, I get jealous. I mean, I know Harvey Elliott isn't a world beater, but he's been a consistent first teamer at the age of 18, 19. They can be done.
These guys are the cream of the crop English talents and have been since a young age. They've been talked about since they were 15, 16, especially Kobe Mainoo. He's been like, United fans have known about him for a long time. So those kind of guys, they're generational type mid players in terms of at a young age, and they're always going to be fast tracks. And I think we have one of those in Mikey Moore, who's much younger, but it's going to take time with those guys. And then there's some who kind of surprise you, and I think Harry Kane was an example of that, who kind of took everyone by surprise. So it's different for every player, I guess.
Yeah, I completely. You look at Connor Bradley as well. What he's doing in a Liverpool shirt right back, he looks completely at home in the Premier League, doesn't he? What a player he looks like. So there are a lot of players. You look at Bukayo Saka; he broke into the team at 16.
Yeah, it's true. But Andrew's quite clear, wasn't he? He said in the press conference, our academy is not there yet. Yeah, and maybe that was he was making an indication that as much as we're all like wowing over their performances and results on 21s, maybe it's not a indication yet that they're of the standard to actually play for our first team compared to maybe some of the other academies. I don't know. It's hard for us to hear that because you're seeing them and you're thinking, wow, why can't they be involved? But Ange is seeing them on the training ground, that he's saying he doesn't think they, our academy is compared to a lot of the other top clubs. He thinks it's not the same level.
But I do agree with Jacob what he said. Like, once we're in European football next year, particularly if we maybe qualify for the Europa League, you will be seeing these players more, and I think it'll become more clear to us if these guys are ready or not. And it's hard to throw them in straight away in a Premier League game if you don't think or if you don't know if they're ready yet, because we need to get results. We need to get results now to achieve our goals for this season. So it is difficult. It's frustrating at the same time when you're seeing around the Premier League 18-year-olds and kids from the academy in various different clubs coming in and doing the business straight away. But that doesn't mean to say that these Spurs boys will come in and do the business straight away as well. So it is a difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
But let's move on, finishing off the last topic of the panel, and we're going to talk about top four. And, we did a panel a couple of weeks back saying Spurs are the favourites for the top four. But you're looking at Villa now. They seem to have found a new lease of life, a bit of form coming back into their season. We'll start off with you, Kiss. Do you think that Villa are now the favourites for the top four? Do you still back Spurs to make that top four?
I still think we'll get top four. I think with everyone coming back and that, as I said, that familiarity building again, I think we will see an upturn in form. I think Villa are very good. I still think there's some kind of tactical weaknesses there in terms of their high line that can get exposed. And I think we'll kind of have an upturn in form. I do honestly think that. I just think it is going to take a bit of time for that familiarity to build again. I think teams might have kind of seemed to adapt to us, and that low block and transition game is obviously something we're struggling with. There's two things with that. I think, first of all, not every team wants to adapt. So some teams are going to play on the front foot against us and come out and press us, and that will suit us. I also think as the kind of familiarity comes in midfield, we'll see those passes like through the lines come a lot bit quicker. touches kind of being limited, so kind of playing off 1 and 2 touch, and as that all builds, those kind of things make such a difference. Those small percentages will make a difference. So yeah, I do think we'll improve, and I still think we'll get top 4.
Yeah, it's a massive game at Villa Park in a couple of weeks, isn't it? Do you think a lot is hinging on that game, or do you think there's just so many more games that it's not that pivotal as maybe people may think?
I think it's a huge game for sure, but I don't think it's a kind of season definer. I still think there's a lot of football to be played, and I do think Villa will have a dip at some point, and I'm sure we'll be up and down until then. I don't see for a number of seasons now, I think there's always been that kind of 4th spot where no one really makes it their own, and I see that happening again this season, with teams kind of losing and winning and losing and winning again.
Yeah, I mean, it is a massive game in a couple of weeks at Villa Park. But where do you sit with it, Jacob? Do you feel like Spurs are still favourites for the top 4? We are sitting 5th at the moment, and 5th could actually be Champions League football next season if things do go our way with the coefficients and everything like that. But we'll focus on top 4 for now. Where do you sit with it?
Well, for me, it's definitely achievable. We do have a game in hand, and even if we win that, we'll still be 2 points behind Aston Villa. And when I'm looking at the schedule, that game at Villa Park and the subsequent 2 games, Luton and Fulham at Craven Cottage, I believe, and then Luton at home. Those are really going to be our last big moments for me in terms of these crucial points, because I think no one has a schedule as hard as ours in that stretch there. What is it, April, May? Those are some atrocious fixtures I am not looking forward to. Now, I do think we'll throw a couple of wrenches into the works as far as the title race goes, because we're going to be playing all 3 of them in those following weeks. But really, United are still on our tail. We got lucky that Fulham, shout out to Adama Traore, he bailed us out and helped us to keep that 3-point gap. We were 11 points clear of United at one point, and then they've slowly caught up with this random Ten Hag form, which I don't understand. But to me, the good teams will get hot at the right moments. Aston Villa, I think, are one of those teams. Unfortunately, I think if I had to put some money on it, which I'm not a betting man because I'm awful at it, but if I had to, I would say I'd probably put it on Villa. I think Unai Emery right now, they are flying on a cylinder. We're like, maybe we'll get there next week. Next week we could be firing on all cylinders. I agree with Kish that once we have our core back and we see our strongest 11, which we saw at the beginning of the year, we will look better. However, I don't think we're going to look as good as we did in the beginning of the season, because I remember in the summer saying Ange Postecoglou, like Marcelo Bielsa, is going to come into this league and is going to put everyone back. They're going to say, oh, hang on, I don't know how I'm supposed to defend this. But then they're going to get 10 games. I remember, and I'm not trying to say I'm Nostradamus or anything, but I remember I said it's going to be like 5-10 games. You give these world-class managers 5-10 matches of game footage. They're going to watch it, and they're going to watch it, and they're going to find out, oh, here, behind Pedro Porro, there's space there. We can probably isolate some space behind Udogie. Oh, well, Udogie's too world-class. Oh, so excuse me, we can't get behind Udogie. So let's go back to that space in behind Porro. And they've kind of figured out. Wolves, perfect example. Gary O'Neill got 6 points against us. I'm saying the first one, I don't blame Ange Postecoglou necessarily. I do blame him for starting Eric Dyer. But again, when I look at points and where points were dropped, to me, losing 2 points to Everton, dropping 3 points to Wolves, those were crucial, in my opinion, for the top 4 fight, because we needed these points before the road really got hairy and really got rough. It's about to get real rough. After Luton, it is West Ham, then Forest. And Forest are no pushover. Let's remember, they were bodying us the first time we played them. Their number 22, I think, I don't remember his name. Number 22 put in like 6 fouls in the first 90 seconds, no cards. And poor Son, I just remember he got fouled like 3 times within 15 seconds. It was crazy. But that's my point, is these teams, they're going to be fighting for their lives as well. When you are in the position we are in, we cannot be dropping those points to the aforementioned matches. To me, that is where I feel like the top 4 race has really become in Aston Villa's hands. Now we're relying on them to drop points. They need to at least lose, and we got to win 2 in a row in order for us to overtake them. So for me, when it's not in your hands, my money would go on the people whose hands it is in, and it's not in ours at this current moment.
You look at it and you say, Villa probably are the favourites. And I do think it is potentially Villa's to lose right now. But European football is coming back around. That Tottenham game is sandwiched in between 2 ties against Ajax. Do you not think that with Villa's squad, it's not the strongest squad. They're starting to build up a few injuries now. Do you not feel like that's going to hurt them a little bit, having that European football, that Thursday, Sunday, if they progress far into the Europa Conference League?
Well, it's absolutely going to work in our favor, and I love that you mentioned that because I didn't know that. That absolutely makes me feel better about the fixture. However, Unai Emery and Aston Villa, their goals, I'm sure, has got to be get Champions League football next year. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, during the Conference League, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
I feel like they win that, they get Europa. They're in position to get Champions League. What is their goal going to be? What is their owners going to be saying, Unai, this is what I want you to do? I don't know the answer to that, but I would assume it to be, give me that sweet, sweet Champions League money is what I would assume. And if you're in a position to get full 3 points on Tottenham, who are right now the closest to taking that sweet, sweet Champions League money from you, to me, I'm valuing that match over the first leg in Ajax. We'll get them on the second one, no problem. But that first leg, let's not worry about it because we got to worry about Tottenham. That's what I would assume the owners to do, or is what they would prefer.
What I would say to that, Jacob, is there is a lot of precedent with Unai Emery in being in this position. He's literally been in this position like countless amount of times, and every single time without fail, he favours the European matches rather than the league. He's done, but with Sevilla, with Villarreal, with Arsenal as well. Every time he's looks like he's going to be in sometimes a title race, but more often than like a top 4 race. And it's happened so many times with Unai Emery where they've fallen away and they've prioritised the European Cup. And they, to be fair to them, they do usually go on and either win it or get to a final and go very close. But usually that's how it works with Unai Emery. It's like his career at the moment. That's literally what he does. He prioritised European football. So I wouldn't be surprised if he goes that way again for Villa. But you might be right. Maybe the owners might, Villa they haven't never been in Champions League, I don't think, in the Premier League era, have they? Or maybe not since the 90s.
Not even in the 90s.
Not even in the 90s. No. So maybe there'll be more pressure this time round than before to really go for that Champions League football and put the Conference League on the back burner. But I know Unai will know that Conference Leagues, I know he's won Europa League a number of times, but Conference League's a competition he's yet to win. So maybe he'll feel...
And they're one of the favourites for it as well.
Maybe feel like, look, I got to go for this and I got to take this really seriously. And also, you got to look at, for me, when I'm looking at Villa at the moment, they got a very good win against Forest on the weekend, and obviously they won 4-2, albeit they were 3-0 up, and Forest did get it back to 3-2, and then Origi missed a 1-on-1, and it could have easily been 3-3, and Villa ended up winning. But I'm looking at their centre backs at the moment. Conte has got a long-term injury. Mings has got a long-term injury. Pau Torres. Carlos has also got quite a bad injury, I believe.
I thought Mings is nearly back, isn't he? Or is he still?
Well, if he is back, he's back from an ACL. So whether he's back at his best,
it was a severe one. Yeah, it was.
Maybe he's not nearly back then. I don't know.
Pau Torres went off at half-time. I don't think it's a severe injury, but all I know is in the second half against Forest, they played a back 2 of Callum Chambers and Clement Longley. Now, if that is going to be their back 2 for the foreseeable future, they're going to have some serious issues.
If that's the back 2 when we play them, we got to be licking our lips in that game. We got to take them to the sword. But also, you look at it like with the Villa season, them going for the Conference League, that could be work massively in our favour, because not only will it maybe diminish their chances of getting top 4, but also if they do get the top 4, if United get the top 4, the English coefficient goes up the deeper they go into the Conference League. Maybe not as much as maybe Champions League and Europa League football.
And also, just to put on Jacob's point about the run-in, we obviously have a very tough April. That's no secret. We have 5 games in a row where it's extremely difficult. But Villa as well have a very tough run-in, and you can't take that away. They go to the Emirates, they go to the Etihad, they've got Liverpool at home as well. They've also got Brighton away, which is an extreme. I think Brighton have only lost 1 game at home this season, or maybe 2 games at home. So that's a very, very difficult game. No guarantees they win that.
Wolves as well.
They've got to play Wolves, which I think that's a derby first foremost, and I think it's a game which Wolves will be relishing in that kind of game. So as much as we have a very difficult run-in, plus you put European football on top of that run in for Villa as well. I expect a lot of drop points for them in their run in. So, but the problem is obviously that we are 5 points behind, and our game in hand isn't exactly an easy game. We go to Stamford Bridge, and I know Chelsea haven't been having a good season, but we know by hook or by exactly. But we know by hook or by crook. We saw they had a very similar season in the Leicester season, and they ended up getting the point against us they needed to stop us. So I've got no doubt about it that Poch is going to have all the motivation, Chelsea have all the motivation to play out their skins in that game. So the problem is we are 5 points behind with a very tough game in hand. So we're not in a great position at this current time to be saying, especially going to a game in Villa Park. The thing, in terms of that Villa Park game, I think it's not a massive game unless we lose, if you know what I mean. A draw or a win, obviously, then it's still to play for. But if we do lose that, all of a sudden it's 8 points and the game in hand is Chelsea. It's all of a sudden it's going to start to look very. Well, I guess we're still a game in between that. We've got Palace at home, they got Luton away. We have to see what happens there. But let's say we both win. Then if we lose to Villa... I don't think
it's a given they win at Kenilworth Road. That's a tough game for them.
I'm not saying it's a given. I'm just saying, let's say, for the sake of argument, going into that game, that if it's still 5 points with the game in hand. If we lose that game, then all of a sudden Villa become massive favourites. 8 points, even though we have a game in hand, that's still 8 points. And that would be... even with their run-in, we got a tough run-in. That would make it very difficult. So as long as we don't lose that game, it's okay. But if we do lose, then it's going to be very, very hard. Well, I think right now, if I'm going to put my money on anything, I'm looking at all the circumstances. I'm looking at everything. I do just shade Tottenham. I do. But I do think it's
touch and go. It's touch and go between everyone.
Since we lost to Wolves and they won their game against Forest, it's definitely swung in their favour.
I think it's massively touch and go. I don't think there's any clear favourite for top four right now. I think it's so tight between all the clubs, to be honest. And I put as much as in the beginning a few months ago, I would have said no chance for Man United, but I put Man United in there as well now. I think it's so touch and go between all three teams. But look, I think we're going to leave it there. I think we have run out of time for today. I want to thank Jacob and Kish for coming on today. First of all, Kish, do you want to let the people know where they can find you and where they can hit that subscribe button on your channel?
Yeah, so it's Lily White Lab on YouTube. We're also on X as well, so give us a follow on X and subscribe to our YouTube. We do kind of player analysis, kind of match analysis. So yeah, hit us up there.
Brilliant, and thank you so much for coming on today, Kish. Jacob, let the people where they can find you, should I say, apart from on the pump ups.
Yeah, appreciate. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Good, such a great way to wake up and just get to talk Tottenham Hotspur. That's such great. Normally, when I wake up for early shows, it's for like a rival show of some kind. But you can find me at United Spurs of America. America's #1 Tottenham Hotspur fan channel. So I appreciate, first of all, allow me on the pump ups as well. Have a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to this weekend's as well. You'll find me here on the pump ups before every match. And then United Spurs of America, I go live about 5-6 times a week. So you can find me there pretty much most days of the week talking about something.
Awesome.
Also, both their channels are in the title of the video. If you want to go check them out.
Exactly. So click those links, hit that subscribe button. 2 brilliant Spurs channels there. But thank you everyone in the comments for joining in today. Really enjoyed that show. So we'll see you all very soon. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always, come on, you Spurs.